Sunday afternoon, get your winter gear out, the gloves, the earmuffs, the hot toddy, as my pop would say. Luke Jones is here to discuss all things Saints as they do come marching in with pretty good football game here, right? I mean, like two teams right now, if you were to give me a quarter, I would say they will both be playing football in January. These look to be playoff teams, Luke.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that, at least how they look right now. I mean, we understand it's mid-October and lots can change on both sides, and we've seen teams look really good in September and October and end up not so good and vice versa. But you look at these two football teams, and it really comes down to this. You have the NFL's top-scoring offense and the NFL's top-scoring defense. I mean, right off the bat, that kind of feels heavyweight fight-like. But I thought what was funny about it, Terrell Suggs was asked that very question. And, yeah, that's a typical question whenever you have a game like this on paper. And instead of the bravado you'd probably expect from him, he said, well, they have the kind of offense that gives you nightmares. And I think on the flip side, Drew Brees, who's coming off of his bye week, coming off of that record-setting performance against Washington a couple weeks ago, he just saw the Ravens collect a franchise record 11 sacks in Tennessee. So I think both of these sides, both of these teams have a lot of respect for each other. I think it's a really fascinating matchup when you look at what the Saints do offensively, what Drew Brees likes to do offensively, compared to what the Ravens have done defensively. So, you know, I mean, you use all the cliches you can think of whenever you have one of those meetings where each side does something at a very, very high level, and something's going to have to give. But it's going to be a lot of fun in that regard. And the Saints, yeah, they're coming off the bye, and I think that's something, if you're a Ravens fan, if you're the Ravens themselves, you have to be concerned about that, giving Drew Brees and Sean Payton extra time to prepare for you. But on the flip side, coming home, playing in Baltimore for the first time in about a month.
It's going to be a little chilly out there on Sunday.
Yeah, and we know that Drew Brees and that Saints offense historically hasn't been as good outdoors, outside of that fast track. So I think this is going to be a really, really fun football game, and I think this is a game for both teams to kind of prove they're not just a playoff team, but they're a Super Bowl caliber team, and I think the winner of this one can stake a little bit stronger claim for that, of course, knowing there's a long, long way to go regardless.
Well, this is a big win if the Saints go on the road and win in the cold against this defense, right? Like, if they can move the ball against this defense, it speaks volumes about them. It also speaks volumes about the Ravens if they shut Brees down to 13 points and force him to kick a couple field goals and win this game 31-13, which is what serve is in the NFL. Serve is that the Ravens better win at home, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you clearly want to beat teams that you know you're better than. I mean, this is one of the games you looked at on the schedule when it came out in April, and you say, you go down the home schedule. Buffalo, better than them. Denver, better than them. The three division games, you're hoping you win those three. Certainly you need to win two of those three at the very least. Oakland, you're better than them. Tampa Bay, you're better than them. So this was kind of the one game on the home side of the schedule where you say, well, the Saints, you know, they were one play away from going to the NFC Championship game last year. Drew Brees, even at age 39, is still an elite quarterback, still firing on all cylinders and still so dangerous. And he's got a lot of help around him. I mean, the difference with him now compared to maybe a few years ago when that offense was still really, really good is how deep they are. And on the defensive side, even though the numbers aren't necessarily great, it is a better defense than it had been a couple years ago. So this is a dangerous football team. And as much as you want to win this game, and you say that because you're at home, and that's kind of how the Ravens' mindset has always been in that regard, it's still going to be a tough matchup. So I think this is a great test for this Ravens defense, not to prove that they're good, because we know they're really, really good. But you do have to acknowledge Buffalo, not exactly an offensive juggernaut. Same with Denver. Same with Tennessee. So it's not as though they've faced a murderer's row of offenses. So if you, even with the Saints coming into your building, and you can hold them to, say, I don't know, 20 points, 23 points, that you should have a great chance to win that football game then, because I would be counting on Joe Flacco and the Ravens offense to score at least that much. So can you just prevent the Saints from looking like the Saints, meaning a team that averages 36 points a game? I mean, we're talking about a really, really explosive offense that got even better a couple weeks ago with Mark Ingram coming off the suspension. So they have two really strong backs, guys that do a variety of things. Ingram gives them a little more power. Kamara is such a explosive playmaker out of the backfield. We know what kind of receivers they have, led by Michael Thomas. So there are a lot of weapons to deal with here, and I think what's so fascinating about this matchup and what Willie Snead said on Wednesday when he was asked about his former team, he basically said, you can't let Drew Brees know what you're doing. If he figures out what you're doing or what you're about to do, you're dead. He's going to pick you apart, and I think the good thing about that for the Ravens is
this is what they're good at, right?
Deception has been their thing this year. I mean,
Yeah.
you go back and watch that game on Sunday in Nashville. It's a look that they've been doing. I think they did a little bit last year, but you're seeing it more and more frequently in their third down, in their sub packages. These amoeba looks that they're giving, and what I mean by that is they have 7 or 8 players at the line of scrimmage, just kind of waiting pre-snap and leaving the quarterback guessing. And that's what you need to do against Drew Brees.
Well, Rex Ryan, in the best days of the Ravens defense back in 2006, when the Bart Scotts and the Adelis Thomases and all those guys were kind of coming together, that was their game. And Ed Reed, that was his game, right? But they were always surrounded by smart guys who had played in the system, and that's part of it, right? And having a stout D line that can handle the run onto its own, and linebackers that can run in space, but having the Albert McClellans and the Anthony Levines and the C.J. Mosleys that have all sat in these meetings year after year after year with Wink, and Wink knows their strengths and weaknesses and knows what these DBs are about and what Eric Weddle and Jefferson are about. This has been very impressive. But that being said, it'll be more impressive if we see it again against the best, right? Like this is about as high a test as they're going to feel.
Yeah, I mean, this is other than maybe going to Kansas City in December because that's on the road, this is as tough of a test as they're going to face in terms of just the defense. Now, we can talk about some of the other games on the schedule. Certainly they have some other tough games that they're going to have to account for, and some of those going to be maybe testing the offense a little bit more. But I think this is such a great such a great comparison as far as what these teams like to do well. I mean, Drew Brees is known, much like Peyton Manning did for so many years, of being able to process information at the line of scrimmage, make adjustments, make changes, check, get into something, get out of something. And the Ravens on the opposite side are doing the same thing. It is very reminiscent of those old Ravens Indianapolis Colts games, where even though Peyton seemed to get the better of the Ravens more often than not until the very end when he was in Denver, but you always had that chess match between Peyton Manning and Ray Lewis, and now it's different that it's Drew Brees against I don't know who you would say would be the kind of the leader there. Maybe Eric Weddle.
See, it's
in the
funny you would
secondary.
say that, because if Ed Reed's listening right now, he's like, no, that was all about me and Peyton, right? I mean,
right. But you get my point. I mean,
and I think in this defense with Weddle and Mosley, either one of them being able to wear the dot on their back and have the headset in, it is interesting to have quarterbacks. And Brandon Williams being pretty stout up front, the way Haloti Ngata was for a long period of time. Having communication and having parts where Zadarius Smith understands what's going on, right? And if Bowser's in there, he at least understands what's going on, that there aren't rookie mistakes and guys getting torched and holes across the middle of the field that happen 5 times in a game. Because if it happens 5 times in a game against Drew Brees, that's probably going to be like 13 points, right? Literally.
Well, I was going to say, if that happens 5 times where things are wide open and there's things completely busted, that's going to be more than 13 points. I mean, I think Eric Weddle said it best, where he basically said what we were just talking about. You can't let Drew Brees know what you're doing before the snap, because you're just going to be dead. He is too good. He is not Marcus Mariota, who's going to miss an open wide receiver down the field in the first quarter. I mean, that's not what Drew Brees is all about. He's going to kill you on those plays, and it might just be a handful of them, but he will absolutely torch you. And what Weddle said is, this is a fun challenge. When you have a defense that hides really well, disguises, tries to deceive pre-snap, and then you have a quarterback who is able to process and read what a defense is trying to do really well. And, oh, yeah, he's had an extra week to prepare, so he was looking at all of those different looks that the Ravens were giving Tennessee and go back to previous games against other opponents. And he's looking for tendencies, and those tendencies are there. Now, Mariota might not figure that out, or Case Keenum might not figure that out, but there are always going to be tendencies. So that's where you have to be smart, and the Ravens and Wink Martindale knows this, and that's going to be the challenge this week, that you come up with some new stuff, and you keep things fresh, and you keep mixing it up. And a look that you showed last week that meant one thing now means something else, because Drew Brees and Sean Payton, I mean, that is a Hall of Fame pairing right there of two guys who have great offensive minds, and they're going to figure things out. So I think it's going to be really fun in that regard. But I think another big key that we haven't talked about just yet that I think is worth mentioning is the need to pressure Drew Brees, which is obvious. You say that about any quarterback, but he's been sacked 8 times in the first 5 games. That's not a lot. The offensive line...
Ravens had that many by halftime last week.
Yeah. The offensive line in New Orleans, well-regarded, especially with Armstead and Ramczyk on the outside, their offensive tackles. And another stat I'm going to throw your way. You know me, I'm a numbers guy.
Mr. Stat Guy.
Football is starting, slowly but surely, starting to get into that, closer to that baseball territory. But the NFL has something called next-gen stats, which basically they're timing how fast players are, how quickly quarterbacks get out the ball, all those different types of things, which until we have context doesn't mean a whole lot. But I'll tell you this about Drew Brees, and then I'm going to make a comparison here. Drew Brees' average time to throw from the snap until the point that he releases the ball, 2.52 seconds, tied for the second fastest in the league. Why do I mention that? Well, I just mentioned that their offensive tackles are well-regarded, their offensive line's well-regarded, so that makes it difficult for edge rushers right there. But he gets the ball out so quickly, and which other matchup did the Ravens have an issue with earlier this year where the quarterback was getting the ball out so quickly? Andy Dalton in Week 2, where they did not get to him. They didn't sack him once, and that's really the only bad half of football this defense has played, the first half in that Cincinnati game. Well, Drew Brees gets the ball out 0.04 seconds quicker than Andy Dalton. So, if you're talking about it just in that context, and look, Brees is better than Dalton anyway, but he gets the ball out that quickly, that's where, to me, Zadarius Smith is going to be so huge in this game because of his tendency to line up inside and throw in Brent Urban there, throw in Matt Judon on occasion, Willie Henry. I think you're hoping he comes on a little bit more after getting his feet wet his first couple games back. You need those inside guys to, if not at least, if not hitting Brees and bringing him down, to at least get him off his spot, at least force him to move his feet and get him out of that rhythm. Because if you don't do that, I don't care how well you cover in the secondary, and the Ravens cover very well in the secondary, he's going to beat you. And Michael Thomas, they're going to beat you.
Well, these 3 downs, you know what I mean? It's like first down, second down, third down, get off the field,
Yeah.
But it's only one play, and you're back to first down. Every time with him, it's one missed tackle, it's one assignment, and the ball's coming out quick. And Luke, the one thing you talk about with the sacks and sort of transitioning into all this, by the way, Luke is here, Baltimore Luke at WNST.net. Before I get to sacks and transitions, I want to give some thanks also to our pal Chad down at Al's Seafood. Sent me home some scallops that we're going to be pan frying around here. You'll probably smell them where you are. They also got the crabs down there and the carry-out. I brought some beer back. I brought some Big Boy root beer home for some baseball activity as well. Right down there at Stemmers Run in Eastern at the foot of 702. They've been doing it down there longer than anyone. The oldest crab house in Baltimore, still at Stemmers Run in Eastern. See Chad the Crab Man. Also catering in, doing some comedy down in the restaurant, and restaurants open on the weekends down at Al's Seafood. Also brought to you by our friends at Fremont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need the right lender. You need our friends at Fremont Mortgage. Carl Delmont's going to be here. We got the Harrisburg Heat season starting, the Baltimore Blast season starting. But if you're in the market to buy or sell, you need some education. Go to Fremont.com to learn more about as low as 3%. It's kind of crazy. I'm going to talk to Carl about that a little later on in the week. We'll also be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry and for There Goes My Hero, which is what we do with our friends at Fremont Mortgage. We'll be telling you more about that and some stuff we're doing with Adams Jeep a little later on in the month as well. Luke, on the sack thing, it was fascinating because, Harbaugh talked about this a little bit. To say, hey, last week was last week, and, it's a week-to-week thing. It wouldn't shock me if they don't sack Breeze at all this week, right? That's the way their offense works, is to never get sacked. And this is one way that Breeze has been upright, is that he doesn't get banged around a whole lot. He gets rid of the ball, which was Peyton Manning's calling card at the end of his career, certainly before, during, and after the neck fusion thing, right?
Yeah, this really is such a week-to-week thing, and with apologies to Marcus Mariota, he's not exactly someone we're talking about going to the Hall of Fame. We're not so sure he's a long-term franchise quarterback, although I think he's better than at least the Nathan Petermans of the world. They absolutely overwhelmed him, and they overwhelmed that Tennessee offense, but that doesn't mean that the same exact thing is going to work against New Orleans. And I'll say this much. Even if the Ravens win and have put together a great performance against the Saints, and they're very, very well capable of that. I want to be very clear about that. I'm just presenting the other side of it. You're still not going to hold the Saints. You're not going to shut them out. You're not going to hold them to 3 points. To me, when you're talking about an offense that averages 36 points a game, I think, can you hold them to 20 points, low 20s? To me, if you can do that and you lose 20-17, I put this game way more on the offense then, because that's how good of an offense that you're facing.
Well, that's the other part of this, too, is that our offense is pretty good, better than it's been.
Sure.
And their defense is certainly the weak part, and certainly on the road, Flacco should be able to move the ball here, and Tucker should be able to make some kicks and when called upon. And, I think this is the type of defense you'd say at home they should be good for 4 touchdowns here, 30 points, right?
Yeah, you would certainly hope that your offense is capable against a defense that I know was better last year, but statistically so far this season hasn't been all that impressive. They've stopped the run really well. Well, the Ravens can't run the ball anyway. That's one prediction I'll make at this point. I'm guessing we're not going to see the Ravens run the ball very effectively, and I'm not so sure they're going to try to run the ball that much when you look at what New Orleans has given up through the air. But this has to be a matchup, especially playing at home, where your offense needs to show up, and you need to start quickly, because you cannot. If you fall behind 14 points to Drew Brees and the Saints, man, you're asking for a really long day, because again, with their 2 backs, with Ingram and Kamara, it's just, whether they're running the ball, whether it's short passes out of the backfield, you're really talking about a Saints team that's capable of playing more of a ball control game, but also continuing to score points in that regard. So Flacco and the Ravens, they have to start fast offensively. There's no question about it, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to start fast offensively. This, to me, is a defense that you point to and say, well, I don't see any reason why you can't score 30 points. And if you score 30 and you're able to hold Drew Brees into the 20s, well, there you go. There's your formula for winning that we've talked about for so many years, whether it was the Ravens going up against New England, whether it was the Ravens going up against Indianapolis years ago with Peyton Manning. That's kind of what you're looking at right now. And look, all these defensive numbers have been crazy. The fact that the Ravens are allowing 13 points a game, 12.8 points per game. They haven't allowed a touchdown in the second half.
Shut out and 11 sacks on my 50th birthday. Gaudy stats. On the road, no less. Gaudy stats.
These numbers are 1978-like rather than 2018-like. But, again, let's remember it is 2018, and there are some really, really damn good offenses around this league, and I think the Saints are one of them. So I think you have to be realistic in that regard and saying, the Ravens are probably going to give up some points on Sunday. I'm not expecting a shutout, not expecting a 14-13 game. So you need your offense to come out firing on all cylinders, and at the very least, throwing the ball. I mean, I already mentioned running the ball. We'll see. I mean, I'm still not all that confident that that's heading in the right direction, although it was okay at times on Sunday. But Flacco's going to have to make plays, and this is one of those games that I would think he relishes, going up against a quarterback like a Drew Brees, who, oh, by the way, has never beaten the Ravens. So there's another little storyline to throw into the overall plot. He's beaten every team in the NFL, including the Chargers and the Saints.
Every New Orleans writer I've had on this week has brought that stat up, because apparently it's just, they just assume the Breeze has been around and beaten everyone. This is the one land that he's never come and conquered in, right?
Yeah.
Well, you only play him every 4 years. So, I mean, if
sure.
you stick around for 16 years, there's only 3 or 4 chances you have. And he didn't stick around San Diego long enough. But, yeah, that's a fascinating little twist in all of this. Has Brady beaten everyone? I know at one point he had never played in San Francisco or something because in his homeland, because he had been injured the one year they played there every 8 or something like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would assume Brady has at this point, but you're right.
I would assume Manning beat every franchise, right?
Yeah, you would. Yeah, I mean, especially. I mean, the big question. I'll tell you the one team Tom Brady's never beaten, the Patriots, because he plays for them. So, in the case of Breeze or Peyton Manning, when you've played for more than one team, it gives you that opportunity to do it. But yeah, I mean, the 0-4 thing against the Ravens. I mean, it's anyone who's trying to use that as a wart on Drew Brees' legacy. It's not, because he's only played him 4 times. But to me, it's just more interesting. And it's a credit to the Ravens and the kind of defense they played over the years. I mean, you think back to the 4 times that they've played Drew Brees. It was 0-3 in that game out in San Diego where I think it was Alan Ricard picked up a fumble and ran a long distance, and Jamal Lewis had a good game. And I think that was a game Chris McAllister was suspended or sent home, if I recall. But you had that. You had the 2006 game in the Dome where the Saints were really good, and Bart Scott and company, they took care of business in an emphatic way. In 2010, they took care of them in Baltimore, and then 2014 was the Monday night game where Will Hill had the pick 6, and the Ravens were still trying to show that they were a legit playoff team, and that was one of the games that sealed it for them to show that they were going to be back in the playoffs. So they played well against Drew Brees, and talking to him on the conference call the other day, I mean, he definitely has memories of going up against Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and Haloti Ngata, and I think Elvis Dumervil had a 2-sack game against him the last time these teams played. So he's played plenty of tough defenses, and I think he had to be watching this past Sunday's game, seeing the Ravens or seeing them sack Mariota 11 times, and just had to be thinking, here we go again. It's going to be another tough one on Sunday, but again, this is going to be a fun one in terms of a great offense going up against what we has looked every bit the part of a great defense, and this is one of those games that you can further cement that reputation if you can at least make a handful of stops against Drew Brees and not allow his offense to get into the 30s.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, and, of course, Luke at WNST.net. All of our coverage brought to you by Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast, and the Kona blend in the cup. And don't forget, the Rofo Rewards card can be in your wallet, or the app can be on your mobile device. When you pump your gas, you earn the points. You get the fried chicken and the Western fries for free, and that makes them taste even better. All of our WNST coverage also brought to you by our friends at Strategic Factory. You're going to be seeing them out at the Ravens game this weekend. What they do? Well, they do marketing. They do hats like this and shirts like this and signs like the defense and the Wacko for Flacco signs, but all under one shop. Where were they 15 years ago when I needed them? I had to go to 3 different places. They put your marketing package together with you, for you, if you're local and you're business-oriented and you need some swag or swagger, please consider our friends at Strategic Factory. Check them out at strategicfactory.com. They're located right here in Owings Mills. Also, the Modell Lyric coming down the pipe. I had such a good time last week at Steely Dan, and put some videos up and some pictures and some of my favorite quotes from my favorite jazz band. Check out the website at model-lyric.com. Lots of things happening. John Cusack next week. Kansas coming up next month. I think I'm going to do another interview with one of the Kansas guys and get one of the singers of the band on as well to talk about the point of no return. Bill Burr's this week going on down there. So we got comedy. Jim Gaffigan as well. The Beach Boys doing a Christmas show. Straight No Chasers coming. And John Mellencamp, which I will certainly be at on February the 18th at the Model Lyric. There's always magic at the Model Lyric. Learn more at model-lyric.com. Also, Sporticulture. I didn't get the flowers this week, but I'm going to get them next week. I promise when the Saints come marching in, it'll smell nice in the studio. You can ship them at sporticulture.com. Court grows them right out on the west side of town in Howard County, and they ship them everywhere in the country, officially licensed and local. It's Sporticulture and sporticulture.com. Don't forget our friends at Charles Nusinoff and Sons as well since 1923. Sidney hasn't been doing it since 23, although his family has been. Charles Nusinoff and Sons, they've been doing it here in Baltimore. They also buy gold. If it's that time of the year and you think you want to get rid of your gold, they'll do that for you. And you can see them in Parkville, right at 695, just adjacent, right outside the Beltway. If you're in the outer loop, you can see them in the parking lot and wave hello to Sidney and his crew out there, or jump off and go see them at charlesnusinoff.com. Luke, the Willie Snead thing's been an interesting side show, and, last week was the Dean Pease thing and the aftermath of the, I guess we can have grudge matches week after week. My grudge match next week will be with Cam Newton, who I just think's kind of a jerk most of the time, so I like beating him more than most teams. But I'd say this, the Snead thing's interesting because it does bring up the DUI and the issues he had last year and staying healthy and what he's overcome, that every time he goes out there and catches a ball, he's a little bit on a mission to prove something here this year, and this is a key time for him to step up to become that next level of player, and in this offense, he's given that opportunity. Everyone talks about his fearlessness across the middle. I don't know that the NFL really probably liked John Harbaugh talking about the blood area in the middle of the field as I read the big game book, which I know you're salivating to read, the Mark Leibovich book that I've been pimping around here as well. But Willie Snead does get those blood yards, and this is a game that probably does take on a little bit more significance for him. They didn't want him anymore in New Orleans in his mind, right?
Yeah, and that's just, that's the nature of the beast a lot of times when, he had the suspension, as you mentioned, but he also got hurt. He had a hamstring issue that really lingered for quite a while in the 2017 season, and you see what the Saints' offense is. They move on pretty quickly. The one guy they wouldn't move on quickly from would be Drew Brees. So it's not tough to kind of, I don't know if I want to say fall out of favor. I think it was more so just a business decision, and they had other guys. No
different than the guys we've gotten rid of on the offensive line. No offense, guys. We like you, and but we can't pay you $12 million around here. That's the game.
But the big difference here is there was plenty of quality there already. You can talk about the offensive line with the Ravens and the cap and that whole discussion. But when you're the Saints, you breed these kind of players that can just contribute for you. And Drew Brees is a big part of that. And I think Willie Snead is proving that wasn't just a product of Drew Brees. He's a productive player. He's not a Pro Bowler or anything like that, but he's a really solid slot receiver. And you look at what he's been able to do. 30 catches. He's tied for the team lead with Crabtree in receptions, and he's third in receiving yards. That's probably about what you would have expected from him. Nothing great, but just really steady and reliable, and that's what you need from a slot receiver. And I think it was apparent. Certainly the 3rd and 17 play to begin the second half against Tennessee, but it's been more so those 3rd and 6s, those 3rd and 7s, and Flacco has frequently gone to Snead. So I think he's been exactly what the Ravens hoped he would be, and he does give you some of those extras with the willingness to block, that fearlessness to go over the middle that a lot of guys just frankly don't have, even if going over the middle isn't quite what it used to be, to your point, as far as what this league is becoming.
Well, maybe it's a good time to even talk about in the off season where Ozzie said, I'm going to change the room, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to change the room. And then he and Eric and, I guess George and I don't think Joe was a part of this, but being more on the scouting side or the college side, went out and said, we're going to pro scout this and we're going to find established guys that might be the missing link. It might be a guy that gets squeezed out of New Orleans, and the whole Brashad Perryman, Mike Wallace, the old Steve Smith leftovers were kind of gone. And instead of going into the draft for it, they went and found it and did a pretty good job this time. I mean, as much as we go back and talk about the Darian Stewarts or the Michael Huffs or the misses or where Jefferson was last year or, where they spend money in the offseason and haven't really done poorly at all in picking up the Steve Smiths or the Derek Masons or, any of those guys in the secondary market. They've been pretty good at that part of the game. This was one where they challenged themselves to get good at that part of the game on the wide receiver side and find three sort of Anquan Bolden-y kind of acquisitions at that position to make the position better. And here we are in week 7 saying we expect them to go out and put 30 up on Sunday, right? Like literally, we expect them to put 30 up.
Yeah, they needed to do that. I mean, it's because it's something they'd failed to do in previous years, and it's a big reason why they've been sitting at home in January. So it was good to see them address it in the way they did in the short term.
But it shows how shrewd they are to put a value on this kid who might get squeezed out, restricted, something that they haven't done, played in that space. And these were deft off-season maneuvers. I mean, we have to tip our cap to Ozzie and Eric at this point, and anybody that was involved in putting the team together, because they put together a pretty nice team. And, Snead's a snippet of that, but this week we're focusing on that individually. But, the collective's been pretty nice here. I mean, it's not over with, and they might not win the Super Bowl, but I am very, very satisfied that the Ravens know what they're doing. As we watch what's going on across the parking lot and watch baseball games with Boston and Houston and these geniuses running, the Dodgers running around playing for World Series here. This is a nice little time to say Willie Snead is Willie Snead, and it's a wonderful story, but it's a good Ravens story, as to why they're 4-2 and we think they're going to score 30 points this week.
Yeah, and I'll give them credit after criticizing them for a number of years because the wide receiver position has been a big problem. So, but I said all along, I've been consistent going back to March that I've liked what they've been able to do from a diversity of skill set standpoint. You look at what Crabtree does, you look at what John Brown does, you look at what Willie Snead does, and it's all a little bit different. And it's not as though the numbers have been eye-popping, although certainly you look at the depth of target for John Brown and the big plays that he's made. But it's not as though they signed 3 guys expecting them each to post 1,000-yard seasons and each to catch 85 balls, but I think it makes the Ravens passing game that much more formidable to the point where this feels like it's at no worse than an average offense. And I mean that as a compliment. And when you have a top 3 defense, which is what they have right now, and we'll see if it still is after they play the Saints and after they face some tough offenses here over the next 4 or 5 weeks, you don't need your offense to be number 1 in the league or top 5. Just be way better than they've been the last couple of years. And I know that's a really low bar to clear, but they hadn't really been able to clear it the last couple of years. So I do give them credit for finally, at least in the short term, getting the wide receiver position right. I still think there are long-term questions there, and I still think they need to invest more in terms of draft picks in getting that position right. And that will certainly be a fascinating question of, when and if Lamar Jackson takes over, who's going to be his go-to wide receiver. But, those are questions for another day. This is a 4-2 football team, and they have done a good job addressing the wide receiver position finally to temporarily shut up guys like me. We'll say that. And, they put themselves in really good position. I mean, they have a very deep, very multiple, very versatile defense that, to this point, even if they haven't gone up against an imposing slate of opposing offenses, they've still looked really, really good, and the numbers are a little video game-like at this point. So let's see them keep it going. Let's see them. They take care of business against the Saints on Sunday and improve to 5-2, and they can hold Drew Brees and company to 20 points, let's say. Then you start to really feel like, okay, maybe this isn't just a playoff team. Maybe this is a team that can make a deep run in January, and still a long way to go. I'll caution everyone about that, and they need to stay healthy, and they've been able to do that for the most part. The injury report this week looks good in that regard, other than waiting and seeing about Alex Lewis. But I think it's setting up really nicely for this team to go into, say, its bye week at, 6-3. Can they win 2 of their next 3? Talking New Orleans at Carolina, home against Pittsburgh. If you're truly a good team, I think that's reasonable with 2 of those games being played at home. So you go into the bye at 6-3. I like that a heck of a lot more than being 4-5 at the bye last year or 3-4 at the bye the year before that. So they're putting themselves in a position to make a run, to not just make the playoffs, but to, dare I say, comfortably make the playoffs and maybe eye a division title or aim for, dare I say, a first-round bye. At least be in that conversation rather than having to scratch and claw every week just to sneak in as the number 6 seed in the conference. And I think they've done enough to put themselves in a position where maybe they aren't going to have to do that. Maybe they are going to be a team that isn't going to be in that 9-win territory, but maybe they can win 10, 11 games and put themselves in position to win a division title for the first time in a while. So, but a big test on Sunday against what I believe is a really, really good football team, and other than the Rams as a strong claim as certainly the second best team in the NFC.
Pretty good weekend of football here, right? We're going to sit around, watch some early games here, and see what the Patriots can do on the road in Chicago. Chargers look to be a good team. They have to make the trip along with Tennessee all the way over to London this weekend. A lot of things going on in the AFC. Cincinnati and Kansas City on the late game on Sunday night. That one's going to keep us up late if we don't even get any baseball over the weekend. And somehow the Redskins are in first place. I mean, there's just weird stuff going on everywhere in the league. It's been a good NFL year, not just here. I think around the league, and I've talked about the empty seats everywhere. This, to me, feels like a significant Ravens fan game. I'm interested to see what a good football team and a chilly day and, fall sweater weather and all that and hot toddies and a late kickoff on Sunday. I'm interested to see what it looks like. I want to see the purple passion back. I know you do as well.
Yeah.
I don't know whether this is a week we start to see that move a little bit. I don't know.
You would hope so. I mean, to your point, you got a late afternoon game, so people can get to the tailgate lots a little bit early, a little bit earlier before the game than the typical 1:00 start, and get some beverages in them, get some good food, and come watch what's been a good Ravens team against what everyone thinks is a good or great Saints team. I mean, I think there are a lot of compelling parts to this. You hope the weather's nice. Certainly can't be much worse than it's been. Really go back to the last couple games of 2017 played in Baltimore. It's just the weather's been brutal. I remember talking to a team official about that, I think before the Denver game, and he was just saying we can't catch a break in that regard. So you hope that it's going to be fall-like. There's certainly not going to be 80 degrees, but I think it's going to be way better than a late December 19 degrees kind of weather. So you would hope all of those factors being involved. And to your point, I think it has been a good start to the NFL season. I think we've seen fewer injuries to major players, which I think a lot of that has to do with luck. I think certainly you could talk about some of the rule changes or points of emphasis with the quarterbacks, but we've seen the NFL be healthier in general, at least with marquee names. And we haven't been talking about kneeling or people upset or fans not showing up. It's been
Joe Flacco ain't no good. Put Lamar Jackson in there.
And we haven't heard that to this point too much. So I think it's been fun. It's been about football, and here locally, I mean, the Ravens are off to a good start. You couldn't have asked for better than a 4-2 start when you play 4 of 6 on the road and 3 straight on the road, like the Ravens are coming off of. And I think there's a lot of potential there for this team to be back in the playoffs, and not just be back in the playoffs, but I think the potential is there, and they need to continue to grow and continue to stay healthy. But I think they could be a team that you can talk all you want about New England and Kansas City, and those two teams just had an epic Sunday night game, and everyone's talking about them in the AFC Championship in January. And, hey, it might play out that way, but I'll say this. I'm guessing New England and Kansas City right now, if you ask Andy Reid or Bill Belichick who they don't want to play prior to that point, they'd probably look at the Ravens in the AFC and say, yeah, that's a team I don't know if I want to have to handle those guys just to advance. So I think the Ravens are in good position, but you have to take advantage. I mean, they're 4-2 right now. You don't want to slip and go into the bye at 5-4, and all of a sudden you're looking at the second half schedule and saying, wow, you're going to have to win 5 of 7 or 6 of 7, and then you're kind of back in that territory you were last year. So
yeah, tough road game coming up next week as well. Then the division games after that are going to be make or break before and after the bye. So, but they're healthy, and let's keep them healthy, and let's try to go out there and score more in this track meet, right? And slow down the powerful New Orleans Saints offense. You like offense? This is a good game. This is there should be fireworks here. Bet the over, right?
Yeah, this is old school. As I mentioned, the Ravens with those 1978-like stats so far this season on the defensive side against what we see in 2018, which is offense. And, hey, Ravens play 4 of the next 5 at home. As much as you can complain about the early season schedule, all those road games, now this is where you should be able to eat a little bit. You should be able to feast a little bit and put yourself in a position where you're not at 8-7 going into Week 17. I mean, take care of business, even though it's some tougher opponents. Hey, coming into Baltimore has always been a tough chore, a tough task. And to your point you made a few minutes ago, you hope that Ravens fans show up and act accordingly, because I do think this is a better football team than we've seen in a few years.
Man, when's the last time we had a 4 o'clock sunset, cold football, fall, pumpkin spice, hot time? I mean, the game time temperature right now says 46 degrees, and sunset is at 6:18 p.m., so, it will be dark in the fourth quarter. I mean, it reminds me of, like, the Baltimore Colts games when I was a kid that kicked off at 2, and, I had the mittens on and the earmuffs and the hot chocolate and other things in the thermal and all that stuff. This is going to be one of those kind of games. And I think as you get to the 2-minute warning at the end of this track meet and it's 31-29 and somebody's got the ball, and because I feel like it's going to be that kind of game. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be tough to not think this is going to be one of those one-possession games, going to be scoring at least into the 20s. I mean, again, if the Ravens can hold Drew Brees to 20 points, I'm going to be really impressed. So I'm thinking probably a game a little more in the mid to high 20s, I think would be ideal, and make some stops, and Joe Flacco and the Ravens offense do what they've been able to do for the most part this season, and that's score points and be productive and be able to move the ball. And if you can do that and make a few stops over the course of 60 minutes, I think the Ravens have a really good chance to come away with a win on Sunday evening.
All right, go watch some baseball. Luke Jones joining us here. Baltimore Luke, he's out in Owings Mills, of course, covering all things Ravens and trying to stay up late with the American and National League Championship Series as we get ready for the World Series as well. And, of course, we'll be at the Super Bowl in Atlanta. And along the road, we're going to be doing some live shows. They're all brought to you by our friends at Fremont Mortgage, as well as our friends at Cole Roofing. We're doing a charity and community series around here, still reaching out to folks. If you want your charity, your event, we did a segment last week for Officer Caprio and the soccer game that happened out in soccer match, I should say, at Loch Raven this week for the Fallen Officers Fund. Throw me a note, nasty at WNST.net. It's all brought to you by Cole Roofing and Pfister Energy. And, of course, you can learn more about solar panels and my therapy sessions with Bill Cole here week after week at ColeRoofing.com as well. The BuyAToyota.com audio vault is there 24 hours a day for you from anywhere in the world. Download, listen to what you want, where you want. The kids call it podcasting. We call it no static at all. You go to the BuyAToyota.com audio vault and listen live or when you want to what you want. Also, the morning newspaper delivers digitally to your email inbox at 7 a.m. That happens each and every morning at 7, courtesy of Planet Fitness at planetfitness.com, where it's still $5 down, $10 a month, right around the corner for you at Planet Fitness. This week, big doings at the Maryland Million down at Laurel at noon on Saturday. They get it going down there. I think I'm going to stop down for a crab cake and a beverage and bet some ponies as well. Beautiful sports bar down at Laurel. If you haven't been to Laurel lately, make time on Saturday, get down there for the Maryland Million. It's going to be a beautiful chilly afternoon, 66 degrees on Saturday, so says the forecast, so I'm looking forward to that. Not a lot of precipitation in the forecast this weekend as well. A perfect fall day for the Maryland Million at Laurel on Saturday. Last but never least, the tech service is always there for breaking news, injury reports, getting you ready for the weekend, and whenever the Orioles decide who is going to run the show, Kim Ng, you will get that first on the WNST tech service. All brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Of course, Dennis is here every Thursday from 3 until 5, getting you home. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.